Hello, I'm David Speers. Australian politics has always thrown up a cast of colourful characters. Some rose to fame on their oratory skills, others their charisma, still some their outstanding policies. But then there are some who gain notoriety for the good times they enjoyed, the occasional drinking session and their dalliances. In this look at Australia's power politics from the past, some of the men and women who grabbed the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Even into his 80s, former Prime Minister Bob Hawke's reputation as a beer drinker followed him. In his younger days, Hawke held the Oxford University beer drinking record, downing a yard of ale in 11 seconds. Hawke's personal life took a battering in 1994 when he separated from wife Hazel after almost 40 years of marriage.
After he left the Prime Ministership, his marriage broke up. He married Blanche. They're together to this day. So yes, it ended up as a love story.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, any little noises that you may happen to hear are only static. It's just something wrong with the system.
The Whitlam Labor government's nemesis, Sir John Kerr, also earned a reputation for his drinking habits, famously appearing at the 1977 Melbourne Cup a little worse for wear.
Cheers from a small minority. However, life is wonderful for all of us.
But when it came to public appearances in the company of young women, Sir John Grey Gorton probably earned the most newspaper column inches. Rumours abounded surrounding his relationship with Private Secretary Ainsley Gotto. Rumours that might be answered in 2023 when Ms Gotto's private letters are finally made public.
This was extraordinary, you can imagine, in the late 60s. But I got to know Ainsley later in life. She was a very tough cookie, a very smart woman. But it became notorious when one of the ministers was sacked, and I think it was Laurie Oakes even back then said, what happened to you? And he said, it's shapely, it wiggles, and it's Ainsley Gotto. He blamed her for that.
Sir John also aroused rumours when he attended an American embassy cocktail party in Canberra in the company of 18-year-old journalist Geraldine Willisey. And a backstage visit to the dressing room of international star Liza Minnelli at Checkers nightclub in Sydney raised eyebrows and much comment.
John Gorton claimed it was all very innocent. He went backstage, gave her a peck on the cheek. Years later, somebody who was there claimed that he heard a commotion. John Gorton was sort of rushing out, and Liza Minnelli was screaming, "Get that man out of here." There was blood on her lip and she was threatening to sue. She never publicly said that. She denied it, so we don't know the truth of it.
In that same era, Whitlam Treasurer and Deputy Prime Minister Jim Cairns' affair with his principal private secretary, Junie Morosi, kept the Canberra gossips busy and interested in the final scandal-filled year of the Whitlam regime. 30 years later, both admitted the scandal-mongers had been right.
I remember walking into the Terrigal conference. I remember for a number of reasons I had no money on me at all. I was very poor in those days. But I do remember I walked into the door of the Florida Hotel, which was what it was called at the time, and she came down the stairs in a white dress. And I could understand why so many marriage vows had been broken.
Australia's history is studded with prime ministers who sought solace during the long weeks of separation from their wives and families, with many familiar figures from both sides of the dispatch boxes failing the fidelity test. Labor great wartime PM John Curtin's affair with the manageress of the Currajong Hotel, where Labor politicians stayed, is widely accepted. Curtin's successor, Ben Chifley, is greatly admired in Labor circles and is also reported to have dallied with his secretary, Phyllis Donnelly, throughout his political career, and with her sister, Nell, as well. In June 1951, Chifley suffered a heart attack in his room at the Currajong Hotel. Miss Donnelly called a doctor, but the Prime Minister died on the way to hospital. Sometimes the excitement of scoring a political victory becomes, well, too exciting to bear. Former Hawke Minister John Brown and wife Jan Murray very famously consummated such an election victory on the ministerial desk in Parliament House, leaving behind a frilly reminder. Tabloid newspaper headline writers are quick to exploit the so-called dirty deeds of national leaders. In the United States, Democratic Congressman Anthony Weiner found himself at the centre of a scandal over a picture posted on Twitter. Also in the United States, former Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser ran into grief one night in 1986 in Memphis, Tennessee, when he felt the cold winds of scandal blowing around his nether regions after he lost his trousers in a seedy motel. Fraser had earned the nickname the Prefect for his haughty disdain of junior cabinet ministers and his arrogant body language in media appearances and performances here in Parliament. He steadfastly refused to say what happened to his trousers, and staffers always refused to answer questions about that night at the Admiral Benbow Hotel.
Look, you listen to me. I had a night out, a meal, met new people, and, explored Memphis. And the terrible thing is, under Labour, I can't claim a cent of this as entertainment allowance, which is particularly unfair because it's the most entertainment I've ever given anyone.
The bare facts are the Benbow catered for short-term tenants. Fraser signed in sometime after midnight as John Jones from Melbourne, Australia. Staff say he waved a $100 bill belligerently to pay for the accommodation. Next morning, Fraser made another entrance into the hotel lobby, this time wearing nothing but a shirt and a tie and a small towel, and complaining about being robbed.
The correspondence got a tip off at the time because he'd had to ring the Consul General in New York to let them know that he was in the Admiral Benbow Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, without his trousers and I think his passport and all his identity cards. His wallet had gone.
Memphis police reported Fraser told them he'd been drugged at a nearby luxury hotel and described the rest of the night as a blank.
He claimed he'd been there for a conference the night before. He'd gone for a drink in the bar in the hotel, and lo and behold, he must have got slipped of Mickey Finn because he woke up and there he was without his trousers in the Admiral Benbow Hotel.
They suspect a, quote, tall blonde Texas woman with a tattoo above her breast.
A lot of investigation went on afterwards. There was allegations. There was a ring operating, a woman called Peaches, perhaps a lady of the night, we don't know, who got him in the bar and led to his misfortune.
Well, it wasn't very humorous, but...
So there's no humour to be found in it today, nor was there then?
Not a great deal.
Mr Whitlam?
No such allegations have ever been said about me.
It gives us all great comfort.
The death of former Liberal leader and Speaker of the House of Representatives, Sir Billy Mackie Snedden, also drew lurid headlines and salacious reporting.
So one of the most famous headlines of scandals in Australia is he died on the job.
Sir Billy suffered a fatal heart attack in a motel room at Rushcutters Bay in Sydney in the hours after John Howard's policy launch in June 1987. The emergency was called in by his young female companion. The Melbourne Truth newspaper called the shots as it saw it.
He was found in a motel room, he died of a heart attack and he was with a lady at the time. Now, apart from the great headline, he died on the job, the interesting fact of this one was who was he with? Because the name was never mentioned for many years. For a long time it was rumoured to be a blonde fashion designer, which I can tell you every blonde well-known fashion designer had to rush to print to say no. Years later it emerged that it was actually a former girlfriend of his own son who said of the headline, well, he did die doing what he liked.
In our next episode, the political crisis that brought down a government, the dismissal of Prime Minister Gough Whitlam.